and welcome back to Pseudo Gameplay TV for another character analysis. We're wrapping up the characters from the first DLC pack, the Marvel Knights, and today's analysis brings us to Mark Spector, or Moon Knight. Now, Moon Knight is a very interesting character. There have been a lot of parallels drawn between who's the Marvel equivalent of Batman, and in my opinion, in terms of performance, gadgets, and whatever else, I think Mark Spector is one of the closest fits. Yes, Iron Man probably has more collective wealth, but in terms of actual performance, I really think that Moon Knight comes quite a bit closer than Tony Stark does to approximating Bruce Wayne. Now, Moon Knight is actually one of the older characters in Marvel Comics, though he's not as well known as some of the others that we've had a look at previously. His first appearance was in Werewolf by Night number 32, which was first released in August of 1975. So he's been around for about 25, 30 years at this point, or more than 30 years at this point. Now, he's not, in terms of Mark Spector, he's not anything super impressive up until he donned the mantra of Moon Knight, which had some mysticism looped in with it, to be sure. But Moon Knight is an expert detective. He's proficient in martial arts. He uses high-tech equipment to do a lot of the things that he does. And previously, though it seems to have been somewhat retconned, he had increased strength, speed, and endurance depending on the current phase of the lunar cycle. Which is a really interesting thing to have played in, especially because, given that period's canon, he was known as the Fist of Khonshu, which is one of the Egyptian gods specifically over the moon. So that's where some of the more lunar bits come into his lore. But in terms of what he can do in this game, he has a very unique moveset. Majorly melee-based, with a couple of ranged capabilities. The first one is the moon landing, where he grapples to a target spot in the sky and then attacks everything in the area as the character lands. And this is one that you can hold the button down to aim and will provide a little bit of a reticle as well for you to have a better influence on that. The second attack is the Vengeance Burst. This is where Moon Knight will leap backward and throw crescent-shaped blades that are also laced with explosives and will explode after a short interim. The third attack that we have, here's where we have Khonshu popping in, where Khonshu's Fury involves swinging nunchucks in all directions and attacks to the front of the character. And this is an attack that you can continue to mash the button as you use. The fourth and final attack, apart from his extreme ability, is the Crescent Kick, where he advances to close in on foes and then kicks them as the character jumps. So an interesting flying, soaring, bicycle-type kick is employed here. Now, Moon Knight doesn't have very many synergies in this game, and as a matter of fact, this team synergy does maximize the 3 synergies that he does have. And those synergies being with Wolverine, I'm pretty sure most of them actually come from Punisher being on the team, and then Scarlet Witch as well. But let's jump in and have a quick look at where you get this character, the quests that you need to go through in order to obtain him, and then showcase his abilities in a 200-person style rift. So once you've jumped into the Gauntlet portion of the DLC Rift, you will need to come to the aptly named Blood Moon Rising quest. Now, this series of fights that you will need to go through is similar in appearance to what we've seen with previous characters, mainly with there being a couple of fights with gimmicks similar to what we've seen in previous Rifts. The first fight involves defeating Loki, where your EP slowly drops, but you gain extra EP by attacking. Abilities and synergies deal extra damage, but basic and EX attacks are less effective. So supercharged EX attacks, or EP attacks, I should say. So that's all the special abilities that characters have access to. And that does stack with the team synergies, so that's quite nice. The second quest that you'll need to go through is one that we're familiar with, enemies style attack rift. And this allows you to defeat certain enemies emerging from portals, which will allow explosives to spawn and allow you to clear out this task a little bit quicker. It is on an 8-minute timer, but that shouldn't be too difficult. The third quest that you have to go through is defeating Electra, where it has a similar gimmick to the first quest in this series, where your EP slowly drops, but you recover extra EP by attacking. However, the change here is that friends and foes alike deal damage that increase over time, and it's on a 6-minute timer. However, once clearing out this quest, you will gain a certain percentage of your health back for each character on your team. The fourth and final fight that you have to go through in order to unlock Moon Knight, and upon completing this, you will gain justice to the character, is defeating Moon Knight. Similar gimmick where we have EP that slowly drops, but you gain extra by using your attacks. And the 3 characters that you'll need to defeat sequentially are Nebula, Ronan, and then Moon Knight. It has a 9-minute time counter, but again, it's pretty simple as long as you bring in a decently stacked enough team. So let's go ahead and jump over into an Infinity Rift so we can showcase what Moon Knight's attacks look like and be on our way. Alright, so right off the bat, it is important to note that Moon Knight, he has a double jump of sorts. However, as he double jumps, he grabs the ends of his cape and will actually kind of float around. And this is cool, given that it does not use any of his EP, but it does allow him to get around and traverse some of the more difficult areas a little bit more easily. Now, his standard attacks involve a 4-hit series of melee attacks, and his aerial involves him swooping down or grappling down to the ground and then slamming into any opponents that are in that area. His heavy attack, before we get into his individual attacks, involves him pulling out his staff or scepter there, bow staff, and he will slam that into the opponents that are immediately in front of him, and it does cause knockdown against any of the smaller grunts. Now, we'll get into his abilities here, where first we have the Moon Landing, where he does not grapple until he has selected a spot, which you can see with the white rectangle here. But he does slam down pretty forcefully and knock down any of the smaller grunt characters that are in that area. The second attack which he has is the Vengeance Burst, where he jumps back and throws out some exploding crescent-shaped projectile attacks, shurikens if you will, which deal a fair amount of damage to the opponents in that area. And it's a good burst area of effect type damage with an explosion as well. Now, for Khonshu's Fury, you do want to be up close and personal with the opponents that you're attacking. It's similar to what we've seen with some of the other characters, such as Luke Cage, where he'll just kind of lash out in front of him, and you can mash the button to attack to continue using the attack. But do note that it drains your EP pretty quick, and you will need to, dole out some damage or come back into the fight and pick up some of these orbs in order to regain your EP if you rely on that a little too much. Let's grab this one over here and then showcase his final attack, which is the Crescent Kick. And you'll see the particle effect here in the air. And it deals a decent amount of damage through stagger bars and has a decent area of effectiveness off to the sides of the kick. But it's certainly not an attack that you want to underestimate, but you also don't want to really overuse it either. Now, in terms of his ultimate attack, This one imbues him with the power of the Moon God. He zips around a little bit, deals damage to the opponents that are in his immediate area, and finishes off the attack by dealing a decent amount of knockdown with the explosions there. Now, in terms of the attacks that I find myself using, I tend to stick to the Crescents, the Vengeful Burst, as those are just a little bit more efficient at kind of providing a getaway or escape option, while also providing a significant amount of damage to the opponents that you are seeking to take down. Khonshu's Fury is okay, but it really drains out your EP, so I would recommend kind of staving that off where possible. Moon Landing is also pretty effective as long as you can manipulate the reticle and launch it off fairly quickly. But Moon Knight is a very fun character to be using, so if you have picked up the DLC and you haven't been playing around with him, go ahead and give him a whirl. I'm sure you'll find use and enjoyment for him. We'll be back on Friday for our final character analysis from the Marvel Knights DLC, that being Morbius, and then next Monday is when the DLC for the X-Men drop. So whichever of those characters is unlockable first is the character that we will have a look at on that day, and we will be bringing it to you as pretty much as soon as I get the game updated and the video recorded. So be sure to subscribe so you are sticking around for that video or can be notified when it comes around. Thanks again for watching. You have yourself a fantastic rest of your day.